fiction, Dr. Josh Bowen's early stuff, working with Skylar Fiction and doing his own stuff with Digital Hammurabi. So I kind of like jumped around a little bit. I did some debate stuff early on too. I debated Gavin Hurlman a couple of times, and I think the last time I debated him was over on.
Fun.
Yeah, that was fun. Each time was pretty fun.
That guy's wild.
Yeah, he's crazy.
He'll drop kick you mid debate.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he likes to get real personal quickly. Especially when you tell him that not all of Paul's letters were written by Paul. He gets really upset by that. Called me out twice on that one. Wanted to debate me. So yeah, I mean, I kind of did a little bit of that, and then started getting into doing, I think that was like 4 years ago, was doing commentary on, Darth stuff and Tom Rabbit's videos about Darth's various, flip outs and things like that. And so that's kind of been it. And then, I've hosted a couple of debates, I've moderated a few, and then I've done a couple of interviews on my channel. I interviewed Aaron Ron, I interviewed Dr. Bowen a couple of times, along with his wife Megan, for some of the books that he was putting out. So far, I think that's been about it. Howdy.
Hey, we're doing the interview portion right now. We'll move into the AMA here in a little bit. I've known Jefferson Spatchcock for quite a while now, and so I wanted to ask him some questions and learn a little bit more about him. But from our conversations, it seems like you're probably a little bit more centrist leaning than either left or right, but that's just me talking with you. I guess, could you tell us a little bit about your political stances?
Yeah, I mean, I usually, if somebody asks, I'll usually say that I lean socialist, but I've been told based on like my opinions and things like private property and other aspects of capitalism that I'm probably more in the communist camp, but basically socialist. So
I was way off. Gotcha. I don't really talk politics a lot, but it was just from our initial conversations, or from our conversations and whatnot. Now, I guess, do you hold any deeply held philosophical stances?
Not really. I mean, not super. Yeah, I'm not like super dedicated to any. I kind of dabble in all of them. So, like, I wouldn't try to say that I was like, I guess in terms of like, I might be considered like a neutral monist. That might get me there. And then I'm, I don't really believe in dualism, but yeah, if somebody can present a really good case for it, maybe I could be convinced. I'm not
when
sure.
you say neutral monism, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so basically kind of like monism and dualism, the idea of, there's something only, a monist, I think, would be somebody, there's just one thing, right? Whether it's, I think basically the idea, it's been a long time since I've seen this broken down. It's either all spiritual, it's all physical. And a dualist would believe that it's either all, there's some physical and there's some spiritual. And a neutral monist is, I think, somebody who tends to believe there's just one thing, that basically there's a materialistic cause, but they could be, or maybe even the other way. I think maybe somebody could be a monist in that they believe everything is like, we are all a simulation in the mind of God kind of thing, and then could be convinced that maybe there's a dualistic aspect after that they could be talked into. I'm probably completely slaughtering that. Like I said, it's a long time since I've done that, but
so you're like a materialist that thinks everything comes from one substance, basically. And
kind of, yeah.
It sounds like you could be convinced for dualism, but you're not quite there.
Yeah.
I gotcha. What about I know you're an atheist, right?
Yeah.
So do you hold any atheistic religions, or are you anti-theist, or what's your stance on actually holding a religion?
I'm anti-dogma. I'm not really anti-religion in terms of like exercising faith traditions. I think it's more difficult. I'm not exactly sure how like liberal Christians engage with that. I'm getting more and more curious about that, because especially if they're like biblical scholars, but they're still believers. Like, I don't know how they balance knowing what they know versus all the dogma that's out there that they know just doesn't line up with their understanding of the books of the Bible, but they still maintain their faith. I don't know how they juggle those. I wish I'd been exposed to something like that even back when I was deconstructing. I probably would have deconstructed differently. I kind of deconstructed into more of an anti-theism thing where I thought the influence of these religions was pernicious, and it's not. I think that's a really simplistic way of doing it. I don't think it's purely the religion. I think it's the way dogma gets used in conversations and against people, and that's what kind of perverts it. So if you can kind of get to a deeper understanding of it, if you're still interested in it, then you might be able to maintain it. How, I don't know. I really don't understand it, but I am interested in Buddhism, and that, from my understanding, from what I've been introduced to, Buddhism is more of a practice and less of a dogma. So and you don't really have to.
It seems like that, or it seems
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness coming out of that I think is kind of interesting. And that you can be according to them, you can be a Christian and be a Buddhist. There are Christians out there that would be that dogma kicking in, but the Buddhists really, depending on the sect that you're involved in, they'd be like, no, you can practice Buddhist mindfulness techniques or engage in the study of it and still maintain your original faith tradition. Like, they don't seem to mind. So I think that's kind of interesting too.
So you're saying that you don't understand how they get blinded by dogma when they cross-reference it with the source material, and there's contradictions or errors or discrepancies. And then that dogma, when they apply that seemingly unjustified dogma in your eyes to real life, it scares you because it seems damaging to people and society as a whole. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that the reaction would be scary. I think my reaction would be that, I'd be identifying somebody who's being a hypocrite.
Gotcha.
What I'm curious about is how an individual, say you got an individual like there's a guy on TikTok like Dan McClellan. He's a practicing Mormon. As far as I know, he attends church, every week. And they put a pin in whether or not, Christians are going to say, well, he's a Mormon, he's not really a real Christian. But this is a guy that went to seminary and studied a lot of this stuff, and he uses his social media stuff to release videos to debunk essentially incorrect takes about aspects of the. People will come out and say, oh, the mark of the beast means this. And it sounds like stuff that you and I would probably hear from a lot of fundamentalist Baptists. And he'll just be like, yeah, this is an idea that goes around. It's a dogmatic thing from X and X time. However, it's not really grounded in anything from scripture. It just came from a Christian tradition 600 years after, the establishment of Christianity, and kind of roll through that. And my curiosity is like, if you know all that kind of stuff, if you know all those discrepancies between how those individual books were written and what audiences they were written to and what they intended, but if you're dealing with a faith tradition that's still trying to insist on maintaining some of those dogmas, how do you reconcile that and maintain your faith? Because it's not so much like I think that person's necessarily, because they could be quiet, right? They just go to church and they do that, and then they have a wall separated. They know their stuff, but when they go to the faith tradition, they just deal with it. But I always wonder, like, how do you deal with people within your faith if you're attending church on a weekly basis who are going to come up to you and maybe hold you to these standards, or call you to task because they find out you're doing videos on this debunking dogma, and maybe that's dogma that they hold precious. That's the part I don't get, because when I was coming up as a kid in Christian churches, my dad actually did get into that several times, where he was a member of a church denomination, but he didn't agree with certain denominational rules and dogma that they had. He never spoke out against it. But when they found out, when other members of the church found out that he wasn't in open support of it, they kicked him out. They kicked him out of the membership. They didn't. He was still welcome to come to church, but he used to teach, and he was an auxiliary pastor for the church and all that kind of.
They removed his influence.
They removed everything from him, yeah, and he's like, I don't have a problem with your rules as far as they were very strict. I mean, if you got really litigious, you technically were not allowed to shop at a grocery store that sold alcohol. Ideally, that's what you should do.
Wild.
Yeah, it was no gambling, no dancing, no secular music, which basically meant, you could only listen to, certain forms of classical, because they actually, that denomination was against Christian rock.
Was it an
And
Amish group?
no, they were Wesleyans. It was the Church of the Nazarene.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and they just happened to be. Some of them I've heard are not that strict, but their rule structure, at least back then, was like you couldn't go and watch movies. You weren't supposed to be watching TV. You had to be careful about the music you chose, what you showed your kids. They were very, very strict. Couldn't gamble. Couldn't even play cards. Monopoly might have been like that might have been a borderline one, a gateway drug. They were very strict, and he never like came out and criticized them for it. He didn't disagree with it. He didn't enthusiastically agree with it. So they were like, nope, you can't
I'm
be
with you.
teaching here.
That's unfortunate for him.
Yeah, he really liked it. And then he understood why that they didn't want him in that role. And he's like, well, this is a thing, but it wasn't a thing before. We'd had this conversation from a few years ago when I was becoming a member that we had issues with some of the things that you did, and I agreed that I wouldn't talk against it. And they were like, well, we thought that you would come along. He didn't. So
It's crazy that the religious elite of that group went straight to silencing rather than trying to address the concerns.
yeah.
Which religious group did what this time?
Oh, we'll bring you in, and we're just doing the interview portion right now. But
Oh, sorry.
yeah, that's just crazy to me because I feel like open debate and open discussion is the key to doing well with anything, right?
Yeah, there seemed to be. It was really passive aggressive. He thought that they had an understanding when he became a member, and then he served doing teaching and things like that in the church for a couple of years. And then when this started happening and kind of coming to a head with other people in the church calling into question, like, there would be other parishioners, other churchgoers would come in and be like, "Are you guys really serious about this movie thing? Because we had a movie night last week. I didn't realize that the rules say that you guys basically some G-rated movies are off limits to you guys." And they started getting uncomfortable with dealing with those questions, and then they kind of looked to then became like a purity thing. And when me and actually one of my siblings, we challenged it with some of the members of the church, like, why wasn't this a problem before? He hasn't changed his mind in any way. And their excuse was, we thought that the Spirit would move him to be more in line with what we're doing. Like,
How weird.
okay. I'm like, so you brought him in knowing that he wasn't really on board with this, and he's been consistent. He's still not on board with it, but you were hoping that he would just kind of shift over. I'm like, okay, cool. That's kind of sleazy, but all right.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
So,
it was a
how
lot.
do you feel about Christianity and I guess let's just say the Abrahamics as a whole?
Probably, I would probably, if I was going to become an anti-theist, it would be more like anti-religious. It would be towards Christianity, just because I have more knowledge of its abuses, its failings, shortcomings, dogma, all that kind of stuff. I was raised in
It's
a
your environment.
yeah, it was part of it. And plus, there's the whole cultural Christianity. I think we all, as Americans, share. Less critical of, or at least less incisively critical of something like Judaism or Islam, because I didn't come up in those cultures. But as far as like the triple Abes, not really a fan of either one of those. Those would be the ones that'd be more inclined to be kind of anti towards. But like if you drop me off I spent some time in Japan. I've been to plenty of Shinto and Buddhist festival days and festival performances and stuff, and those are pretty cool. I didn't, granted, I didn't really understand what was going on, but like, um, maybe it's because they're heathen and pagan. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that tipped me over. But yeah, that was for me. That never really bothered me.
I'm with you. Yeah, it's definitely interesting watching some religious rituals, but I'm with you. I never really understand them, right? Now, do you have a family? I've never really heard you mention anything on that.
No, not. I mean, I'm not married. I'm single, no kids. That I know of. No, I mean, not really. But I do have like my immediate family is all still around. My parents are still married. I have 4 brothers and sisters.
Gotcha.
And so I spend a lot of time with them because they're all kind of still kind of in the. I live in a separate city from them, but you know they're close by, so I tend to stop in and see them once a week or so.
I getcha. Now, do you have a official scientific or philosophical education, or I guess are you self-learned on those topics?
As far as like philosophy goes, I've got a bachelor's degree in what MS. Well, I probably shouldn't dox where I went to school, but it doesn't matter. The school that I went to had an interdisciplinary humanities pre-long classics thing that they did through their liberal arts college, which is now gone. But I got that. I was one of the last people. I think I actually got my degree in the last class that was offered. Then the university restructured that, and that was it. So, but yeah, that bachelor's degree, nothing specifically in. It's more like a kind of a classic liberal arts degree, with like kind of like a triple focus. I ended up focusing in um, history, Japanese, and geological sciences, or no, geographical sciences, which is essentially like GIS stuff, data, um, and some kind of some basic. The kind of stuff that you would do for like data analysis for like civil service stuff, map building, that kind of stuff. So
Gotcha.
boring stuff. Yeah, that's kind of what I did. And yeah, that's as far as I got with education.
So did you start with the online? I guess you probably started with online debate communities, right?
I mean, like when I deconstructed.
Well, I mean, with the YouTube thing, you probably started with the debate communities, right? Or did you go straight into YouTubing and trying to debunk stuff?
Yeah, I mean, my like all of my deconstruction happened just from reading and then discussing it with like friends and some of my siblings that were kind of also questioning some things at the same time. So like my sister and my brother, we would have these discussions back and forth. My twin brother, he really got into watching the YouTube, the kind of great debate. Steve McRae and he caught Darth Dawkins early on. In fact, that's how I found out about guys like Darth Dawkins was
I
through some of
gotcha.
the contact that he was seeing. So, and I kind of stayed out of it. He debate discussions with some people, and I had a completely different username. And I talked to some people like Floyd FP and Skylar Fiction years and years ago. But yeah, I didn't come in initially doing that. The biggest thing that happened, I had deconstructed, and then at a job that I started, I was getting in discussions with a guy who was a Reformed Calvinist. Reformed.
Oh, how fun!
He is Dutch Reformed, and he and I both had the same basic idea that we didn't mind talking about politics and religion at work. We try to keep it on the down low. But yeah, we had complete, and he was very very conservative, economically, socially, and then I was going the other way, you know, religiously and politically. So we would like kind of like spar with each other, and he actually I found out about the precept technique because he pulled it on me. He used it on me, and I was like, "There's
In
this
person?
in person, yes."
That's horrible.
Yeah, he used it on me, and I was like, "This is some," my initial reaction, I'm like, "This is some bullshit," and I went and dug it up, and I swore that night I found it. I Googled until I just kept Googling and doing searches for the terms that he was using because I'd heard him somewhere before, and I'm like, I've heard these before, and then I found an exchange between Douglas Wilson and Christopher Hitchens, and Wilson was saying the same thing. It was one of the first times Wilson had said this stuff to Hitchens. It was the same terminology, and I'm like, I knew it. And then just a little bit more digging into it, it was like presuppositional apologetics, and then I found Bonson, Till, the rot at the bottom, the bottom of the tree. And I was like,
It's
here it is, the mother lode. And
so bad.
2 or 3 days later, the next time we had an opportunity to speak, and he started doing it again. I'm like, he was looked at me, and I was like, yep. And I was like, I'm like, so you're really into this transcendental argument, right? Are you committed to presuppositional apologetics? And his face dropped. because there was no, now it wasn't a secret weapon, right? He knew that I found it and looked into it, and his face fell for like a minute, and then he started laughing.
Funny.
He's like, you got me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I can Google some catchphrases, and you were dropping like a handful of them, so, and you kept repeating them, so yeah, that's good. He's now an atheist.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a better argument for atheism than theism.
Yeah.
So from there, what was next?
After getting into that, well, I think getting into that made me more interested in because having those discussions with him kind of, I mean, you do that in person, that's a lot different. That's a little bit more of a tightrope than doing that online. And so when I got online, that kind of encouraged me. I'm like, yeah, I can maybe try to have these exchanges, but I didn't go into them thinking that I was going to win. I went into them thinking like, kind of carrying in the same thing. Like, I'm gonna talk to these people like I talked to this coworker. And it's not really about winning or losing. It's about listening as best you can, trying to steelman as best you can, and then offering up the objections that come to your head. And I think I still tend to operate that way. But depending on the groups that I get involved in, they don't want to do that. Jay Robin was really notorious for that. If you tried to like take your time and think through a response, he was like on you, trying to badger you into a quick reaction. He just wanted that exchange to go back and forth as quickly as possible. And I never liked that. I'm like, you're not here to have a discussion. You're here to, this is like some kind of performative verbal ping pong. I lost interest in that.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I've dabbled at Clubhouse a little bit, during that time. And, if I got a couple of drinks in, I might pop in on a Clubhouse thing and, yell at Tone Loc or Jay Robin. But it was never productive. It was never productive.
doesn't sound like it would be. I did Clubhouse some, but I'm with you there. It's kind of not a great format, especially it's kind of like the guest rooms here where the people in power are people that want to be in power. And the
Oh,
people that want to be in power just want the power, right? And so it's never really a good conversation. It's just people getting muted after they make a good point, or the people on the side of the person in power are getting to make points, whether they're good or bad, and the person on the other end is getting muted for interrupting, right?
yeah. Yep. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I was seeing more and more of that even before the format change on Clubhouse, and I would jump on there and get involved, sometimes a few days in a row, and then end up just feeling like, these conversations don't go anywhere. It's just more frustration than anything else. So I backed way away from that. Somebody invited me to one of the rooms, and I'm like, I'm just not interested. Those rooms were usually too big. There was too much over talking. So.
Do you want to go anywhere with the atheist activism, or is this just a hobby for you?
Yeah, it's more just a hobby. I mean, I think I'd probably rather branch off into a little bit more into politics because I'm not really interested in advocating for atheism. More so like helping people get a more normal view of it. That being a skeptic or being a non-believer is fine, and then maybe challenging because I don't really have it's more about challenging bad dogma in religions that people try to, because that's really what caused me to deconstruct from Christianity. The more I started, there was the first step of sort of like addressing the dogma that would come about from people kind of writing from a really negative standpoint, somebody like Dawkins or Hitchens, or maybe even Harris, kind of raising some just like general moral entailments and questions about where things don't line up. But then the more I got into actually doing a little bit more study of the Bible itself, reading people like John J. Collins or even Dr. Bowen's stuff on slavery, the more I realized that, when you sometimes for some people when they deconstruct, they get really bitter because they didn't get the accurate information. They felt that they were lied to.
You know what? I was lied to.
Jefferson, would you claim that you know a god or specific gods or all gods do not exist, or where do you stand on those positions?
So I mean, my stance is I believe gods don't exist generally, But that's, kind of my belief statement. But as far as like saying, I think it's possible for somebody to take the bigger leap and say that they have some knowledge, or to whatever extent, that they know that a God with certain properties doesn't exist. Because the description of that being, the properties that are being assigned to it, are contradictory. So in that case, I think if somebody's trying to say a God with kind of the three or four omnis, there's really only three. Those properties are contradictory, and so there's because these cause some catastrophic clusters. I have reason to think that or not only good reason to believe that God doesn't exist, but good reason to believe it can exist. Reason to think that it's impossible that it exists. Whether or not that translates to somebody's idea
how would
of
you address plot
knowledge.
armor? What if it's got plot armor?
Well, I think that's what dogma is, right? So that's usually hey, we just get this to work with this to work with this, and then plot armor works great. Especially if you do the Otangelo thing, we know that intelligence can make stuff, so everything was made by something that can make anything. That's the big intelligence. All right,
I'm with you though. It's a wacky stance.
Yeah. I think it's kind of close to where a lot of people are trying to do a young Earth, trying to prove the existence of a Christian God by disproving abiogenesis. Saying abiogenesis is either impossible without some kind of intelligence, because evolution is really improbable, which seemed to kind of boil down to what he was doing. And then, of course, the Big Bang probably couldn't happen either.
How do they think that though? Think about that for a second. So what they're saying is that because they're disproving the leading scientific, even if they were disproving the leading scientific method, how does that prove their God? What if it was just panspermia instead, right? Or aliens populated the planet, or whatever the fuck. It doesn't prove a God.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've never heard one about it. Anytime it's like, look, there's plenty of Christians that have no problem accepting the theory of evolution for origin of species, or maybe even entertaining hypotheses about abiogenesis, because they could just be like, oh, well, why not? The one account in Genesis says God breathed life into dust that he formed. Abiogenesis sounds like it might be a little bit more, unless you have this inerrant take on the image of God, people being image bearers of God and people being made in the image of him. If the image bearer of God is just life in general, the tree of life, then I think for some, literal minded Christians, they're gonna buck at that one. Yeah.
I would say we get a hyper focused amount of fundamentalists online and people that have these conspiracy beliefs online, because it's impossible to find community like that in person, right? Because every Christian they talk to accepts abiogenesis, and every Christian they talk to accepts the Big Bang Theory and accepts the science behind all this, and they just make a metaphysical claim that the God came before the singularity or whatever, right? That's what they're saying in most cases, right? They're saying this science stuff is all true, right? And so when we run into these people online like this, yeah, there's a lot of them, right? But I think it's a hyper-focused percentage of the population, because most of the casual Christians that accept the sciences are going to church and not debating this stuff because they know they're going to lose and they don't care.
Yeah, they're just not interested in it. Which, and actually, in a way, I think they're perfectly right not to be, because I think a lot of the people that you're right. I mean, for some of us, skeptics, I think it's a question of getting fixated on that person being wrong about something on the internet and not wanting to back down. I think it is for them too. But for the skeptics, it always seems to come from one perspective. If you get a Christian that comes in and just wants to talk about no, I swear to you, the Exodus story is literally real. Moses parted the Red Sea, right? There's a lot of skeptics that are going to be like, whatever, they're just not going to get invested in that. but there could be like a geologist who comes in, and like wrong, just somebody in the physical sciences that is like, they hear that, it triggers something, and they're like, no, that's a bunch of horse shit. I'm going to tell you why that can't work. So yeah, it just depends whether it's natural sciences, it's somebody talking about young Earth, it's somebody doing maybe even getting into flat Earth, but it's always like that. It seems like the ones that get the most heated are the ones that are trying to like, it's the philosophical ones,
Yeah.
Because I think when the science ones get involved with it, I think that they really just kind of I don't understand why a lot of fundamentalist Christians debate them, because it looks horrible for them. If they talk to somebody who not only is has a comprehensive understanding of the science that they're talking about and is a good communicator with lay people, it sounds dumb to say to wipe the floor with them, but if that Christian comes in hot and is trying to argue with this scientist that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, they're going to end up walking away from that discussion looking like a stubborn moron. And those I'm like, I just don't understand why they do that. I think they still have room in the philosophical stuff because they can always like channel. They can always bank off of Plantinga or Van Til, guys like that. Hell, even R.C. Sproul, if they want to like defend evidentialism, I think they've got a little bit more wiggle room there.
I'm with you. But before I started doing all this stuff, I thought philosophy was really, really dumb, right? And so I've been doing this stage with you for a couple of years. I was studying philosophy before that, trying to get caught up, because I did a little bit in college and whatnot, but never really focused. I focused on the sciences, because that answered the questions, right? But there was like a shift, because I'd been debating people online a long time, right? But there was like a shift in like 2018 to all philosophy, because they can't deal with the scientific objections, right? And
Yeah.
I think ever since, maybe it was like 2018, 2019, something like that. And ever since then, it's all been philosophy. But the problem is they're not doing real philosophy, right? They're doing like this jacked up Van Tillian Bonson-esque theology, right? Like Bonson had a doctorate, if I'm not mistaken, in theology, or master's in theology, and like a doctorate in philosophy, something like that, right? Like he was educated, right? But he
Yeah.
definitely was a biased philosopher, right? And he did philosophy wrong. I have spent several years studying this, trying to figure this out and develop an art, and I can tell you, he's doing I'm stupid, and I still think philosophy is really stupid and dumb. In fact, my entire YouTube is showing stupid philosophy, right? I think that shift to this like proprietary language is why everybody has shifted to philosophy, because everybody's trying to figure out this proprietary language, like you were talking about in person. He was using proprietary language you didn't understand. It's like, I know what those terms mean usually, but these are weird usages of these terms. It's because it's proprietary language. Oh, it's equivocations with proprietary language. They're using terms incorrectly, but within their framework, it's correct. So they want you to do an internal worldview critique without knowing what their actual position is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really the tough thing, because then when you try to ask them for definitions of the terms, then they'll give you, one of Van Til's or Bonson's kind of, goofy proprietary definitions as well. And
you're like, that's not right.
Yeah, if you've got any familiarity with where that came, with any of those terms in normal, in other, branches of philosophy, you're just like, no, that doesn't work. And then, if you're completely unfamiliar with it, you might just be like, for me, I was a little bit familiar with some, a little bit of philosophy, like some metaphysics, but really basic stuff. What I was hearing, I'm like, you know what? It just, it was just one of those bad feelings. I was like, this doesn't sound right. And it's almost like having an interaction with somebody at a car dealership, and you're about to get fleeced. The spidey sense starts going off.
Right.
Yeah. I'm like, there's something not right here.
Yeah, the first time I encountered Darth, man, I actually had that YouTube video posted again recently by Supreme Leader Kim, or whatever his name was. But my first debate with Darth, I'm like, this guy is obfuscating and throwing the wool over my eyes and not actually talking to me. I really hate these discussions because it's moved away from philosophy. Because what philosophy is supposed to be, or is supposed to be, is a discussion between two people about topics like like you and I are having now, about our thoughts on different topics. I mean, I guess we're not really delving too deep into most topics, but it's like delving deeply into the nature of these different topics and talking about them, right? You're not trying to like debate bro somebody, right? That's what this precept is. It's a debate bro script that debate bros people into submission, right? And it makes them feel unsure about their position because they couldn't. Because I remember I had that happen to me, right? And it makes them unsure about their position, rethink their position, because, well, they couldn't respond to the. And so, sure, it might get some really weak-minded people, but most people that encounter this that I've seen have become much stronger debaters and much more knowledgeable overall on philosophy and the sciences. And most of them understand why it's wrong at some point pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't really take long after somebody encounters it for them to be like, oh, okay, that's what he's saying. Well, that's really dumb. Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody presuppose that this thing has to create everything so that we can have knowledge, whether that's from direct implantation of that God through God powers or through natural processes of the revelation of our natural senses and our reason and things of that nature, right?
Exactly.
But why would? How can they justify? You can't just. It's just an unjustified presupposition, right? And it puts them from a false starting point, and that's a problem with the position because all their arguments are built around that because they have to argue to that. They have to argue that break, that break in between causality and what we can't see, like that,
right.
that formation of space-time. They're trying to argue prior to that. They're trying to fill in that chain, right? They're trying to make up something for that chain that's totally unjustified because what metaphysics actually is a speculation about natural reality that scientific investigation can't currently confirm. That's what metaphysics actually is, right? It's speculation. It's not. Yes, in a broad sense, a metaphysical claim would be a God claim, right? But there's that's why philosophy is stupid, because the singularity, claiming what the singularity consisted of, is also a metaphysical claim.
Well, yeah, I think the problem is,
and they're not equal.
Well, it's the shift into thinking, like, because my understanding, I mean, there's philosophy and there's metaphysics, which is kind of talking about that stuff kind of outside what we know, and the idea that it, as an exploration, it's looking at the foundations of truth, knowledge, reality, whatever, ended up becoming this thing that I think you've probably heard at least as often as I have, probably more because you're on these a lot more often, where a lot of the apologists are saying that these metaphysics are necessary. And it's like, I don't think you understand that metaphysics is more of a, this is a really abstract conversation.
So they're using it as like another ontology. So when they say metaphysical in that frame, they're saying evil has an ontology outside of a definition that we've provided to a category of stuff that falls into this definition, right? That matches evil, right? And so they're saying that there's an ontology of this thing, and besides that, where it actually exists within our realm, right? Like it has an actual existence within the realm, or the universe, or what else? Laws of logic. That's a more common one. They're saying like the laws of logic exist ontologically outside of this these systems of logic that we've created, but actually as some governing supernatural or non-physical thing in the universe, right? Some causal thing. And so I feel like I'm with you. That's just a grand misunderstanding of what metaphysics is, because metaphysics is speculation. So a metaphysical claim about the laws of about the nature of the universe could be, it could be like, I think that the laws of logic could have some ontology outside of just these laws of logic that we've created for these systems of logic, right? And maybe they actually exist in the universe, and what we've created is a reflection of that, or something like that, right? That would be a metaphysical claim, right? But they're claiming, they're just outright, right, like presupposing it and saying that this is a thing, and it's just as unjustified. They're claiming another ontology would be is like I said, with the God thing and the singularity. What's in the singularity are two totally different metaphysical claims with two totally different metaphysical or totally different groundings, right? They have two totally different weights on the scale of metaphysics, and they're both making claims about roughly the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's why metaphysics is really stupid.
Well, when it's getting abused like that, yeah. Also, the idea that, because Darth makes this, it's kind of fundamental to his mistakes, is that he assumes that a revealed ontology is the only possible one. The all of reality is revealed to you by the God that he believes in, and that's the only way that can work. And so when he's questioning anybody, he basically wants to know, like, oh, okay, well, what's foundational to you? He's implicitly assuming that the only ontology that's possible is a revealed one, and he wants to know, from your perspective as a skeptic, what is revealing that ontology, what is capable of that revelation. And it's like, dude, you just assumed a bunch of stuff before you came in here. What makes you think that I believe in a revealed ontology or revealed epistemology? And he'll just be like, well, because scripture tells us this and revelation is necessary. Like, okay, prove that.
So those are his justifications. What he's actually asking you is, what is your necessary being? So there's an implicit necessary being claim in there that's going unjustified on his end, but he's using the fallacy. I forget what it's called, but it's where you, like, if they don't respond to it, they accept the assumption. It's like assuming something or whatever. But basically, what he's doing is he is slipping that past you, right? Like when you said that, you didn't even mention the necessary being claim. There's a necessary being claim in that, which implies necessity and contingency, which are heavily debated in philosophy, and he's just skipping past all that. He's getting you to grant that, and then the necessary being on top of necessity and contingency, right? And so he's like going a step beyond that, right? And the first time, most people say reality to him because because it sounds like, what is the most foundational thing, right? Which is kind of what he's asking. But he's actually asking, what's the necessary being? And so if you don't, and if you respond to that, saying, hey, what's the necessary being, and or what's your justification for there being a necessary being, he's gonna just do what you said earlier and jump past it. And but that's the whole argument, right? He gets you to accept a necessary being right off the back, and then he bullies you into accepting the rest of the shit he's gonna say around that.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I've presented the universal quantum field in response to that with relatively, I mean, it's probably not sound argumentation. I was really dumb then, right? But I mean, it was a defeater for his position. He still holds his position. It is a defeater for that position.
I've seen that run before. Yeah.
It is a defeater for that position. There is science that backs the position. It is a defeater.
I think Leo Filius ran that on him.
I'm sure several people have.
Yeah, I think he was Leo might have been the first one that I saw completely do that. And
I don't know. I haven't seen anyone do it. I just do stupid philosophy, right? And so that was just really dumb, and I figured it would be funny to do that, and I did it, and it's really dumb, and it's stupid philosophy, right? It's really dumb. It's just a granting necessity and contingency, which are heavily debated in philosophy. Like, there's so much nonsense that and baggage that comes along with that position.
Yeah. Yep.
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I don't really have an. I know that you've dropped a few more videos since that I need to watch. I think you. I haven't.
Bro, I've
watched
been
the
going hard.
I don't think I've seen the one where you run your atheist precept thing on Otangela. That was the one that I had marked to watch later. So
You want to
following
watch
behind
it
it.
here with me and comment on it with me?
Sure, if you want to spark it up, yeah.
Second. So, do you reject the self-evident truth of our shared
Much better.
naturalistic,
Yeah, thanks.
atheistic reality that's been revealed to all through both natural and special revelation?
So you're trying an inverted presup on me, right?
I'm running atheist presuppositional apologetics. It's a revolutionary method of counter-apologetics that I developed recently.
Well, you should play that on Dart.
Well, I'm running it on you right now, right? So do you reject the self-evident truth of our shared naturalistic, atheistic reality that's been revealed to you through both natural and special revelation?
Well, how has that been revealed to me?
Uh-oh.
I just told you, natural and special revelation.
Well, I've not yet encountered it, so...
Yeah, you have.
Can you, hey Taco, can you clarify something for me? I think I understand what you mean by natural revelation. It's just
Yeah,
we
sense
observe it in the
data.
natural world. What would the special revelation be?
Reason. The thing that separates you from a rock.
Ah, so. Okay, thank you.
Well, the thing is that I think that all physical manifestation actually points to an intelligent
So,
creator.
Otangelo, that's not what I asked. So I asked, do you reject the self-evident truth of our shared naturalistic, atheistic reality that's been revealed to you through both natural and special revelation?
Way to
Well,
stay
you
and roll
claim
there.
that
Yep.
it is
You need to. I need your position on that,
what
sir.
did you say? Self-revealed, right? Or self-evident? What did you say?
It's very important when you're running atheist presuppositional apologetics to not let them pull you off topic, because they're going to sit there and try to pull you off topic for like 20 minutes. And it's going to be a challenge every step of the way. A frickin' challenge, man. Because you're going to have to fight all sorts of stuff. I don't know if he mentioned it in this video or the next one, but he brings up something and I'm like, hey man, you're getting way ahead. I'll turn it back on.
Can you repeat it? Self-evident. Yes, I reject that it is self-evident.
So you're saying you don't have sense data?
Correct.
So you...
Like, not reliable sense data, right? Is that it? Like, oh, well, maybe I do, but maybe
Did
it's
you
being...
hear that?
That is incredible. Wow. I don't have sense data.
So Tangelo, just to confirm, you don't have sense data. Correct. He said that. You have no feeling, so you're not responding to me when I'm talking to you. You're not able to interpret the
that
words
stream
I'm
makes me
saying.
want to have a taco right now.
Yeah,
A
Tangelo,
soft
that
shell
seems a bit
taco.
self-contradictory
With some hot
when you said
sauce.
correct, because you heard him
Yes.
ask you the question.
So, Otangelo, given that you're lying to us right now, because your empty husk of a worldview provides you no foundation for any understanding, any form of intelligibility beyond the local scale, you, sir, need to abandon the shallow husk of a worldview that you currently adhere to and adopt my own. My religion, Atheism, is a drag-and-drop religion which you can put in place of your own religion, your own incoherent worldview. It's a worldview replacement for people like you, and instantly have a more coherent worldview. It's in my bio, the holy paste bin. I'm the pope of it. I'm happy to help walk you through it. Yeah, and that was pretty much it. Dead silence after that.
I'll check out part 2 later on.
Yeah, it's I cannot believe that it worked so like that. I didn't even get into it. We didn't even get through the first question, dude. And he said he doesn't have sense data. I mean, I'd say that is a win for atheist presuppositional apologetics.
It would be kind of refreshing if you do the one question where you're saying, "Do you reject this?" And then they've come like at least the other guy was like, well, "Wait a minute, what do you mean by special and general and special revelation?" And Otangelo didn't seem to ask that. He didn't. I mean, maybe it didn't occur to him to ask that, which not a big deal. But then it was asked by the other person, and so he got the answers. You told him, sense data, general, reason, special, and he didn't. I mean, yeah, that was weird. He just denied that he had sense data.
I thought it was fucking funny, man.
Can I ask you something, Jefferson? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of perturbed by a thought. The atheists demand like some sort of evidence for God, right? Like some sort of proof.
Some do, yeah.
I mean, yeah. The hard, staunch atheist has already decided that there cannot be a God, but like the other ones. But I think what I mean is like generally every atheist rejects God because they don't see any evidence for God, right? That's where the whole negation comes from. However, the thing that confuses me is that the criteria of evidence that they demand is based on the five senses, right? Like something, if it falls within the realm of the five senses, or in fact, one of the five senses is the sense of observation, which is the scientific method, right? So
right.
if it falls onto that you see some proof of God, then you would the atheist would be inclined to believe. But if we just observe when we use our senses, we still know that we can sometimes be thinking that we are using a sense and the outcome that the senses give us is a certain thing, but behind that thing, it turns out, could be something else entirely, right? For example, like before, I think, a century in the history of the human beings, all the time before the past 100 years, we used to think that the sun is right in front of us because we can see it. But then scientists told us that it is at least 8 minutes away. It's just that the light we see of the sun makes us think that it's right there. And
Right.
so some of the stars that we're observing in the universe, it could turn out they're not even there anymore. It's just that the light is reaching us up. So even our own senses can show us something which could not be true. Then if we know this to be true, then why are we demanding evidence which could just like the criteria isn't good enough, I think, when people reject God, that because we don't see any evidence. Of course, dude, even if you could see some evidence, it could be wrong.
Yeah. I can't
You see my point?
Yeah, I can't really. I don't think I can address this. I'm not going to speak for all skeptics and non-believers, but for me, the first thing that I would, I do, it was a lesson that I learned kind of the hard way. I don't try to make the argument that there is no evidence for God or I want to see it, because that's not the case. There is evidence for God. It's just that the evidence that's there is not convincing to most skeptics. Rhetoric, logic, cultural, faith tradition, basically coming up in those. Those I think are all evidence for it. You know, a kind of shared historical, cultural thing going back can all be appealed to as evidence for the existence of a god or gods. I don't find it I don't find that to be convincing evidence for the actual existence of a god, but I'm not going to tell somebody who is a believer that those aren't evidence. But if they ask me like, well, is this good evidence for you? I'll be like, no, I don't find that to be particularly convincing evidence. So that would be the thing that I would do there. If somebody is asking for something like they want a hypothesis, and I think this is where, I don't know if you noticed it or followed it at all, but Taco had done one of these with Otangelo, and during the AMA portion, Otangelo got into an extended conversation with J.L. Warren, and Otangelo's kind of take on trying to present, he's trying to present kind of a God hypothesis. And I think if an apologist is trying to do that and they're entering into that kind of thing, then they are kind of putting themselves in a position where the skeptic can be like, okay, I want to see that demonstrated. Because if you're if the apologist is laying that out, they're going to have to show some kind of empirical demonstration of the cause and effect. They're stipulating the effect is creation, and they're saying this stuff is created by therefore there's a creator that made it. But the connection of the creator actually making the creation they can't show, and they're trying to lay it out in scientific language, and it's like, well, that's why it's failing you. I think if they're trying to say that what they're doing is scientific is bad, that's fine. But I also think that if skeptics who are keen-eyed about those kinds of presentations then turn around and talk with somebody who's trying to give a philosophical justification or some kind of special, kind of an appeal to special, subjective, personal thing, a feeling that they had, a religious sensation, those are evidences. They're just not convincing for that person. And when that person
I agree.
when they try to say, those aren't scientific, so those don't count, I think that's when they overstep their bounds. So I would agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in agreement. Then yes, like my subjective experience of, getting to God shouldn't be your reason to believe in Him. It's just my experience.
Right.
You have every right to reject it.
Right. And I wouldn't say like, well, I would struggle because I don't know, I can't feel your subjective experience. So I would be like, well, no, your subjective experience doesn't convince me, but I don't think it's fair for me to say that that isn't evidence for you. My opinion is I don't think it's good evidence for anybody, but it is evidence of a type. I just think that it's weak evidence, and despite weaker because exactly there's the sensations of that subjective experience I didn't feel.
Well,
so
my theory on that. So I think that the atheist and the Christian or the Muslim tend to really need to kind of understand more of a phenomenological outlook on this. And this is what I mean by this. I think the atheist is wrong when they try to equate these experiences to something like the space monkey, because we know that's not an arbitrary act of someone's imagination. They are actually experiencing something. But what they're actually experiencing, that's the question where the leap comes. So if we understand that experience, they're having what's called a saturated intuition. Something is presenting itself to their consciousness so strongly, they're having an experience of what's called the numinous. It's like a version of the sublime. It's usually used as the might and power of a deity, even though you don't necessarily know a deity's causing that. You're having an intense feeling. Now, that's all you know. What really is the ultimate metaphysics behind it? That's where you'd have to kind of go into. But I think that's the thing. I think you could sit there and say, if the theist was to be honest with the atheist, would say, look, when you call it the space monkey or the pink unicorn, you're really trivializing this experience. It's not an arbitrary act of my imagination. Something is coming at me. I'm experiencing something very intensely. But then the atheist would say, sure, you are, but let's try to understand this in a deeper way. We have, just as we have Muslims experiencing this, we have Christians, Jews, Hindus, and Buddhists. They're all having these common experiences. And that would be a problem with like an exclusive revelation. And so the issue is, how do we understand this and how do we interpret this better? So this is where it comes into understanding and interpreting that experience. That would be the way that I view it.
That makes sense. Because regardless of somebody being an atheist or a Muslim or a Christian, Hindu, whatever, right? There is something outside of us that we all, at least agree on. We don't doubt something. Like we all agree that we are in the universe; it's physically present, right? Nobody's going to deny that, as something that's not substantial, conclusive. So I kind of see what you said there, and I agree with it. However, I also want to point out that this subjective experience that where people theists say that they had an experience with God is mostly seen. This behavior is exhibited in the Christians, where they literally, because it's part of their faith and creed, where they say that
Real
they had
quick,
an
guys, can
experience
you
with
guys
the Holy
ping
Spirit.
Darth Dawkins back, please, real quick? Everybody
Yeah,
in
he doesn't
chat.
like me because I was.
I can't stand that guy.
Okay,
Just
but here,
everybody ping him in chat real quick. Just be like,
oh,
Darth,
he will
come
definitely.
back.
I think he has me blocked. But I would like to bring him in here because I actually would like to bring up a question to Darth in reference to Jefferson, and it's basically this: has Darth ever provided a real transcendental argument for God? And Jefferson, do you know like what an actual transcendental argument would be?
I mean, yeah, and yes and no.
Okay. But transcendental argument is not presuppositionalism. Presuppositionalism is
No.
question begging. It's saying the Christian God exists, therefore the Christian God exists. In a transcendental argument, you're taking your experience and you're finding out what's essential to that experience. So I'm kind of working with the Neoplatonic transcendental argument. And the idea is something like this, that if I take my experience, I find that I experience unified objects in the world, like the tree outside. It's one object that relates a bunch of predicates together. You'd agree, right?
Yeah.
I also experience a unified consciousness, which is basically just a fancy way of saying there's a common stable identity throughout time. I have one thought after another. I understand myself as the person, as the subject that's having these thoughts, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I also have the unity of self-reflective consciousness. So within that, I understand what's the key feature: unity. Unity needs to be explained, and that's where the Neoplatonic one comes into play. It is going to be that sort of transcendental condition to explain these unities. Now the question is, Darth Dawkins ever once said, here's our experience, and here's things in our experience that require the Christian God? Like, for example, if he says, things like facts, I said, okay, Darth, what would a fact be? Like if I make a statement that my cup is red, I need to have things extended in space, a temporal duration, and I need certain logical categories, like the category of unity, a unified object. And so I'm saying that these unities need to be explained. So my question is, anybody here ever heard Darth provide a real transcendental argument? I've never heard it. It's basically just the Christian God is true, therefore the Christian God is true. Hopefully, I don't want people saying I'm strawmanning or caricaturing him.
No, I
Is that
mean,
the case?
I don't
He
know
presented me
particularly about
something
that.
similar to that before.
I think
But why is that surprising though? Like the Christians would do that because it is part of their creed to believe first, and then the answers would be revealed to you. The science behind
No,
it
but
would
you don't
be
want
Battery
that is
critical.
to
part of
do
the
that in
mechanism.
philosophy. But you don't want to do that in philosophy. In a philosophical
Charging
argument, we give
battery.
reasons. Christians wouldn't want to do that. They wouldn't want to actually provide a real argument. So if they provided a real transcendental argument, the goal is to say something in our experience. We have this, and this is a necessary condition to account for this experience. That's the idea.
I haven't come across many Christians who provide that, and so I don't know.
I think Darth would probably brush off your concern with locking down what the unities are, and then just default to saying God is the singular foundational thing. He is what basically unites all of it. Which I've heard him come
How does he
close.
do that?
That's the problem. Well, the problem is like, let's say that's the case. Is he uniting all that is good and all that is bad? Because for Darth, everything is not only created by this being, but also sustained by it. So the fact that there is, identity over time, and all of these other kind of philosophical finger puzzle, Chinese finger puzzle kind of things, are all just solved by him saying, well, no, God, we just define God as this ultimate being, and all this
What does
stuff
he
is
mean by
solved.
identity over time, though, for something like that's conceptual, right? Like, isn't what gives something identity over time for something that's conceptual, like the agent who comes up with the concept?
I think that's what we're talking about. Identity.
Yeah,
over
I
time,
don't understand how
It's the I.
Yeah.
He said, I can't remember who it was that asked him this. Asked him about the ship of Theseus thought experiment, and he said, "Oh, there's no problem."
Well, I mean,
Okay,
the main thing I wanted him to give, or these people to give, not just saying the Christian God is true, therefore the Christian God is true, something to the effect of, here's something in our experience that makes the Christian God a necessary condition for it. That's what I'd be more interested in, and I've yet to hear
Right.
that. And I would like to see,
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
okay, what I'm saying is that most of them, okay, presuppositionalism is just question begging. All presuppositionalism is the Christian God is true, therefore the Christian God is true. You have to start with the Christian worldview to prove the Christian worldview. That's basically it. So they're not actually, okay, so if they were to give a transcendental argument against like atheism, what they would want to say is something like this. Atheism implies materialism. Materialism implies determinism. If determinism is true, then everything is caused, even your beliefs. And for you to have rational assent to a belief, you have to kind of separate yourself from the causal nexus, evaluate reasons as reasons, and then choose based upon that. And under atheism, which implies materialism, which implies determinism, that's not possible. So materialism is self-refuting because the belief in
But
materialism.
atheism doesn't equal materialism.
I know.
It
I'm
does,
just telling
but
you
he's
that's what
incorrect.
rational. I'm just telling you that's what they could do. I'm just giving you an example.
Okay.
I'm just telling you that would be.
No, but there was something in there that you said that I disagree with. That if determinism is what caused everything, then your belief is part of it. I don't think that should be the case. Like people can believe in all sorts of things, regardless of the reality being determinist. They can still believe something else.
Right, but I think
no.
I think Pagan's been saying that would be a better tack for them to take that style of argument than to do the precept. Yeah.
And I think that's basically, so I'm questioning Jefferson in your discussion with these. Has Christians ever done those two things? A real transcendental reasoning by basically saying there's something in their experience that requires the Christian God, or here's a problem with atheism, not just this, well, you just can't account for this, you can't account for this, but basically saying if you have atheism, you have materialism, you have determinism, and you have a metaphysics that completely attacks rationality, since rationality can't be causally determined, you have to have the ability to evaluate reasons as reasons. Have you ever encountered Christians that use those tactics more, which not tactics, those which would be more serious philosophy? Or is it just this, well, how do you account for this? Or how do you account for that in your worldview?
Not that I know of. Yeah, the two biggest appeals that I hear, how do you, skeptic, account for all this? Why is there something rather than nothing? Or how do you account for morality? How do you account for good and evil? I mean, that's not literally how they put it, but those two seem to be the two biggest categories. Like,
why would that? I don't get that. Right? Like, therefore, like if we can't account for that, therefore God exists.
No, but that's not. No. That's not what they say, and that's not what we say. We're saying that because in the atheist paradigm, right? If I was an atheist, then I would have to give a proper reason why killing someone just because I feel like it is bad. But somehow the atheists, they say that it is bad, but why is it bad? They never tell us why.
Why? What are you talking about? Any atheist could do that quite easily. I don't know what you mean. Like atheists do that all the time. Tell you why it's bad. I actually think the opposite is.
That's my point precisely.
I think the opposite is the case, right? I think the Christian can't tell you why it's bad. They're going to tell you it's bad.
Wait! You missed the point that I was trying to. I'm saying, why is it not good? They all say that it is bad, but why? If I was an atheist, I would be arguing that it's not bad. It's okay. It's good.
No. Why would that be true?
Because why would I be wrong in saying it? If there is no creator, if there is no accountability, then that's what I was just saying.
What do you mean there's no accountability?
This is not a question, by the way. I was just saying that if I was an atheist, I would not feel bad.
But I know, but you're making a lot of mistakes. Because what do you mean there's no accountability?
No, because there is no God who's going to reprimand.
So what? We're accountable to each other.
Yeah, but why should we though?
Actually,
that's the entire point.
So that's easy. We're accountable to each other if you want to survive, right? So it seems to me like human beings, our morals are like you have a survival component.
Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Because since he's an atheist, so one of the things that tell me to think about if you've encountered these people, they tend to be atheist, but I don't say they're all atheist. Okay, so I don't want to kind of attack atheism in itself for this, but I think there's a certain group of people who tend to be atheists that do this. And so in the Islam server, they're going to give me a stage on this, exposing what's called the Ask Yourself script. So Jefferson, have you encountered certain atheists before? again, they predominantly in Glock's server, Eric, Mustafa, Fallen God, Turns, Mason, Evan, and others. What they're doing is they're employing tactics to win debates that are based upon excessive semantic analysis and an excessive need for reasons. For example, if I was to tell you something bad happened and you responded by asking what happened, that's a serious question, a car accident. Then if you ask me where it happened and I said the intersection of 5th and Main, you know, that's a reasonable question too. Where did it happen? But once you start to ask questions like, what do you mean by intersection? Well, what do you mean what I mean by it? You know what an intersection is. And then you ask me, and I say it's a place where two roads meet. And then you ask, what do you mean by roads? So there's a group of people, the atheist debate bros, that use these tactics. What they're doing is they're employing excessive semantic analysis and an excessive need for argumentation to run diversion. Have you ever encountered these people?
Directly, no. Indirectly, yes. I've seen some of this stuff in action. Yeah.
Okay, now, do you feel if that gets associated with atheism, that's going to be seen as bad because it's going to associate atheism with sophistry?
I think it's already associated with at least online atheism in these kinds of rooms, and I think that's why I talked to when I talk to my nephew about some of the discussions I have or some of the content that I do. For him, he's in his 20s, early 20s. So for him, it's just like, yeah, those groups are just, they're just cringe, man, because it's just going to be endless, nonstop, circle jerk philosophizing, and so I think it's already there.
Hey, let's keep this between y'all and Jefferson.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
That's
why I asked Jefferson his encounter with these people as an atheist, and does he think this is going to give a bad name for atheists if atheism gets too much associated with the atheist debate bro script?
Do you? I wanted to ask a follow-up question, I guess, clarifying question. Do you see this kind of technique being employed by some of these people against Christians equally, or are they more likely to use these kinds of techniques if they're debating Muslims?
I think they try to do it in everyone, even like fellow atheists. As well, just other talk. So you could say that they tend to actually start out with atheists against Christians, but it's just become like a series of tactics they use to kind of pwn people on the internet. That's it. Yeah, they usually tend to be kids at about like in their late teens or early 20s, and they've got kind of a script that they got from Ask Yourself, and there's certain tactics that they do, and you can say it's gotten to the point where they're just kind of using it to everyone, but it originally started out as more like in line with atheism.
Yeah, the one thing that I noticed earlier, since you brought up Ask Yourself, I don't know, but he seemed to be in line with this. This really isn't, well, it is kind of a criticism of him. I don't know. I haven't followed his stuff in a long time, but it was a tendency to, if they're going to have a discussion with a believer, and the believer was going to make a claim like they believe in God, they believe it's Jesus, something like that. They wanted it. Some of these guys who are into the more formal logic side of philosophy wanted that distilled down to a syllogism, and they expected the person to do that. And it's like the person that you're talking to probably isn't, familiar with formal logic, and I don't think that you necessarily have to do that. It's been kind of interesting to see some people like somebody like a Darth Dawkins or something get haughty and try to bring up modus ponens or modus tollens or something like that, and then completely land on his face. Get it exactly the opposite way. Completely contradict it. But it's another thing to be like somebody's just trying to lay out a kind of in common English their reasons for believing in in Islam or Judaism or Christianity, and somebody's like, oh well, I want that in a premise conclusion kind of format. And it's like, you don't if they're ask them if they're interested in learning how to do that maybe first, or at least ask them if they know, but don't expect them to do that. I don't know that really that really adds anything to it. So yeah, I mean, that's just an observation that I've made that's similar to that. I've gotten, some of the discussions I had last week, some people were getting after me for I think they felt that I was being wishy-washy about my definition of being an atheist. So yeah.
One thing I wonder what's going to happen though too. It's kind of interesting because I think it's a script battle. So Darth Dawkins runs a script and another person runs a script. And to spoof the whole thing, I think Taco can verify this, that what I've done is I've went online to ChatGPT and I basically gave a transcendental argument and asked it to make a dialogue tree of it. And it actually has a dialogue tree. And I have one where the theist is called Bart and the atheist is just called Atheist. And it's an actual script back and forth that says go to 2. It is. I wonder if you're going to see people start doing that. They're going to go to ChatGPT. It's like, they're going to ask for scripts, and there's going to be this big script, and Darth Dawkins might be saying, you know what? It took me decades to build this script. Now you can go to ChatGPT and have it give it to you in about maybe 10, 20 minutes.
The thing that what's scary about that, I've never done that. I've never even attempted to, because I would imagine it would take a lot of force feeding stuff into ChatGPT to do it. But you can get pretty close. One thing that I did when ChatGPT came along really quick, I would go and find somebody had typed up a quote, some kind of bonkers statement that maybe J. Robin made or Tone Loc had made, and I would grab it and I would put it in there and I'd be like, hey, ChatGPT, can you help me evaluate the logic of the following statement? Copy and paste it in there in quotes, and then just see what it generates. And if you do that too much, it'll start to hallucinate. Like debate bro statements will make it lose its mind after a while. It will start to kind of like contradict itself. It'll start to get, and as soon as you push back on it, like, I don't think that one's right. Man, you try that again. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me give this to you the way that you want.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, because if
it's broken, it's just no.
If you work with like any form of like a design or coding, aspect of ChatGPT or how these things work, it's not an intelligence at play here. It's just like a lot of code, and the mistakes. Like if you ask it particular questions about a subject you're well aware of, you'll see how many mistakes it makes.
Exactly.
So
but it can actually give a decent. Okay, so this is what you have to do.
No, nobody's doubting that.
The question or person you're talking against, does he know this? All you'd have to do is this. So just a quick thing. Just go to ChatGPT and say, show me Bernard Lonergan's argument for God based on intelligibility. And you can even ask, hey, you know what? What if you add the condition that any act of intelligibility requires complete intelligibility that's God? It'll keep doing it, and you say, make a dialogue tree of this. And then you say, okay, if the person asks justification, this response, if they say yes, go to this response. If they say no, go to this response. And I really wonder if this is what you're going to end up seeing in the future. Because I gave one to Bart because I thought it was funny. I want to see him do it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The marvel of AI and softwares like ChatGPT is the ability to give us what we want in the time that it. That's where the really, wow factor lies.
Well, no, what I'm saying is I wonder if you're going to see people running scripts here based on that. If this is what the future is, you're going to say, well, what the hell? Is this guy running a script?
It technically is, yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody's already done it. I mean, the real question is, are they going to fess up to it? My guess is no.
Well, Darth Dawkins.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why, what, Jefferson, I've spoken to you for like only hardly 5 minutes. But I can tell that you're the kind of man, I'm guessing I could be wrong, but it seems like you're the kind of man who is in pursuit of the truth, regardless of where it comes from. Otherwise, if you were a hard, staunch atheist, right, you would be like the extremist theist, where they just ridicule the other side. And I don't think that's an academic. Like, if somebody genuinely wants to find out the truth of the universe, they wouldn't have that stance,
Yeah, where I get ridiculed is if it's somebody who I think is doing the performative dogma dance, like Darth Dawkins. When I see that kind of stuff, and it's like, look, I when I see somebody who claims to be in his 60s, doing the kind of stage, or what they call a cage stage Calvinist routine, where he's got to prove the non-believers wrong. It takes me back to my teen years when I was an enthusiastic Christian and was also kind of developing that state of mind, where it's just like, well, if only everybody saw things my way and agreed with me, then everything would just work out fine. And so when I see people doing that and trying to use dogma to push it, like if Darth is talking about the end times or the mark of the beast or getting the book of Revelation completely wrong, it's like, look, you might believe that because of the church you go to or the church you grew up in, but if you do a little bit of reading, you'll find that Bible scholars, the believers too that study that, know the difference between what that book intended to say to its readers and what a lot of people are trying to pretend that it's some end time prediction. That's just one example. That's the stuff that I will kind of like. That's the stuff that I kind of want to poke at, because it's usually you got like a Mr. Batman type who's just really haughty and really acts like, I'm telling you what the Bible is telling everyone, and it's like,
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
yeah, you're wrong. Yeah, it's like you've got a bad attitude and you're wrong. He's really. It's like you should. I don't understand where the message of humility for a lot of Christians went. Like they just flushed it down the toilet, and now they just got to browbeat people with it.
Well, I think what happened is that the Ned Flanders ideal really screwed, well, I don't say screwed Christianity, but for a long time it had the Ned Flanders ideal. And recently, in about the last 7 or so years, Christians decided to be more assertive. And the quote unquote based Christians. That's why you see in here the Orthobros, the Calvinists, and others. They're not wanting to have the Ned Flanders image. I think that's what's happened. Because I don't know, and I'm not sure how old you are, Jefferson, but remember for a long time, see, I'm 48, so I know this, but Christianity had this Ned Flanders image for a long time.
Yeah, it did. Let me ask you guys a couple questions, because, and by the way, I didn't say this before, but good to see you, Rascal. Long time no see.
Hello
as
well.
Yeah, great to see you. D-Man, what, if you don't mind me asking, what religion, denomination are you? Unless you don't want to.
I'm a Muslim.
You're Muslim? Okay. And pagan, are you actually a pagan?
Yeah, Neoplatonist. So I call that blonde, muscular pagan, as you can look at my hair color.
Okay, Neoplatonist. Okay, all right. Yeah, just wanted to clarify. And I know that Rascal is, I believe, well, he's an atheist, but he's also an existentialist, I believe.
Which is interesting because most atheists here are analytic philosophy atheists. I don't find very much existentialist atheists anymore. I don't find very much of what I would call the Nietzschean or Sartrean atheist. Atheism seems in here to completely be dominated by analytic philosophy. Huh.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
I think that's why the debate bros tend to be atheists for that reason, because analytic philosophy kind of helps. It kind of helps for atheism, and it also helps to do the debate bro tactics. So analytic philosophy gives the ability to do that.
It's a response to the theological claims and the incoherent theological terminology.
Well,
yeah, and it can kind of go either way, because like if you read like somebody like what's an analytic Simon Blackburn, I think is his name. I read one of his books. I think it was Think. Like, and I've seen him give lectures and stuff. His stuff tends to be pretty soft spoken. But then again, I read it after I deconstructed. If I'd read it when I was a Christian, I probably would have thought he was really condescending and insulting. So, take my opinion with a grain of salt. But he seemed kind of easy going about it. But he does try to write books for lay people explaining philosophical and analytical philosophical topics.
Jefferson, let me ask you something. Like, were you always an atheist, or were you like a Christian who turned atheist, or born into a Christian household, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I was a Christian in my entire childhood. My parents were Christian. I grew up in several churches, depending on where they were, where we lived. And we had a falling out with like one of the last churches that we regularly attended when I was in my late teen years. But I remained a believer. I kind of developed a distaste for overly dogmatic believers then, because that was what we were dealing with.
As a Muslim, right? I'm sorry, were you done?
Oh no, I was just going to say I didn't really question the existence of God until I got into my late 20s, and then I think I kind of came to the realization that I didn't believe that there were gods at about 30. That was when I switched over.
You know what I found when talking to the atheist, or an atheist that's like a serious atheist, where I think, I wouldn't say a problem, but where it's because it's more interesting where the disagreement lies. Like, for example, in the Islam server, they had a discussion with Graham Oppy, and then I gave Graham Oppy my Neoplatonic argument. And I think he disagreed with a certain premise that unities require a causal principle to relate them together. But he did say, if I grant you that premise, your argument takes off. Now, I think at some fundamental level, there's just going to be certain beliefs that are just fundamental. They don't really have any prior justification, because things can't be justified endlessly. And it could be the difference between the theist and the atheist is one of those beliefs. I think the term Husserl used to describe it, it's called Urglauben, which is basically primal certainty. It's just this belief that you have that is bedrock to your worldview that can't be justified even any further. Like another one would be something like ex nihilo nihil fit. I can't give a justification for it. It's just true in the sense that by understanding what nothing is, if you have nothing, nothing can come from it. I mean, I can't give you any further justification. So I think in some sense, there's going to be these, what you would call these primal certainties or primal beliefs that we just don't, is where we're going to disagree on. That's basically it. And so that's what I had. And that was an interesting thing when Api made that point. And I don't know, when you get to those and you bottom out there and it's like, yeah, you believe this and I don't, or I believe this and you don't. And in some sense, those kind of beliefs, it's harder to give any more fundamental principle to adjudicate who's right or wrong on it. It's just at some level, I just believe this and you just believe the opposite, and that's just it.
Yeah.
What do you guys, and this is a question to the atheists, what do you guys think of moral realism? Like, how do you guys find it? Or what do you think of it?
Of modal realism?
Moral realism.
Did you say moral or modal?
He said moral
No.
realism.
Yeah, the first one.
Oh, moral real? I don't know. I think I'm probably more of a. I tend to believe more in subjective realism, because I think there's. I don't. I mean, moral realism would require what, like like some kind of objective moral fact, right? Independent of minds.
Exactly. That's what moral realism is. It says like compassion and justice and tolerance. They exist independent of our feelings and.
Independent of our feelings, yeah. Independent of our feelings, maybe, but like if it's in the kind of the strict definition of objective, where it's in that moral realism is independent of a mind or minds. No, I wouldn't be inclined to believe that, because I think moral realism, or any morality, I think is going to be based. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna but because this is what I actually heard about this argument a few days ago, and it made sense to me. And the claim here is that even an atheist has within themselves like some sort of moral realism, where it is existing regardless of the.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't really know that that's all that persuasive. I mean, I think there's things that humans have built into us, and they've done studies on this where people just have difficult time. But you can do a study on a group of people. I can't remember. It was about disgust, about who different levels of disgust in different populations of people. And I remember one of the implications of one of these studies was to find that they found that people who tended to identify as conservative politically, whether they understood it or not, but I don't think that came into question, but they self-identified as politically conservative in the United States, tended to score higher in terms of disgust reactions to stimuli, whether it was, and it didn't matter what it was, odors, sounds, images, but images were a big one. So I think there might be something about us as animals that is grounded in that.
So that's the point entirely, right? Then if there is something, then morality is objective. You're making my argument for me if you think about it.
Well, no, I think so. There was a statement from Nicholas Nassim Taleb where he doesn't like atheism. He thinks it's silly, and he believed it was because atheism cannot define the sacred and the profane. But I would argue the exact opposite. I think that the reason that people tend to believe in like a moral lawgiver or a god or something like that, kind of grounding everything, is because we make decisions, we make distinctions between the sacred and profane, and I think we're uncomfortable when we do it, because one person's profane may not match another person's.
I think you're talking about, are you familiar with Jonathan Haidt and the weird theory?
The weird theory? I know I'm familiar with Jonathan Haidt, yeah.
I think his idea, he considers Western people to be quote unquote weird because we don't have the full range of moral instincts that others have. And those, let's say some like purity, I'd have to find the exact ones, but liberals tend to focus on 2 or 3 at the exclusion of others. Because I think religious people, I think purity is a strong instinct they have. And that's why they're going to have problems with things like homosexuality. it's not that it's against equality, it's more that it seems impure to them. So if someone is more focused on equality and fairness, they're going to be more, let's say, accepting of homosexuality. If they're more focused on purity, they're going to see it as an impure act. And that's where the differences come into play, I think, in things like that, because there's probably going to be some experiences that everyone's going to agree on, because it's going to violate purity, it's going to violate equality, it's going to violate fairness. But I think what's going to happen is when you get things like that, when you get this conflict between two moral instincts, and one person has one to the exclusion of the other, whereas another person has kind of.
Anyways, Jefferson, did you understand my point that I was trying to make? That why is something bad inherently, even for the atheist? I think.
Yeah, well,
I hope you
and
understood.
I'm glad that Pagan brought this up. I understand your point, but I'm glad Pagan brought this up because I read the first version of Haidt's book on this, The Righteous Mind, and I remember thinking about this, but it did kind of at the time I think I just picked it up and read it, but I wasn't really
The Righteous Mind.
I think the first book was called The Righteous Mind, but he's gone on with other people to kind of form kind of like fine tune what it is. But yeah, it's essentially that morality isn't just one thing. It's based on those categories. And like Pagan was bringing up, like their studies found that what you're presenting, like it sounds intuitive, like, well, why do we all agree on these things? But there's actually groups of people, and it was kind of weird because they identified that liberals were actually lacking any real emphasis in at least two of those categories, whereas people from most religious faith traditions and people who are politically conservative or libertarian scored kind of equally across the board and then higher on a couple of others. But they had a more they had a broader spectrum of that kind of morality, whereas like liberals were like the kind of sanctity degradation thing wasn't really that big of a deal.
Yeah, and you need the sanctity degradation to be against things like homosexuality. But the thing is that liberty oppression, the other end, the liberals are going to say you're oppressing these people. They need liberty. That's where the tension's going to come. So if you don't have as much of that sanctity and degradation, you're going to think, well, I don't think it's disgusting. I mean, I really don't care. It just, my aesthetics don't matter. It's they deserve rights, and we can't oppress them. Whereas the conservative just sees that it's degraded, it's impure. That's the way they're viewing it.
Yeah.
I get what you guys are saying. Well, quite frankly, I don't see like any reason for a political stance to be involved in this discussion. I understand that there's, we see that this is what happens with certain people who have a certain political stance, and brilliant. That's more information. We learn more. I love that. But I don't think like this has to do with the political stance of somebody.
No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you could do this with two parents. This doesn't even have to be political, right? You could have a situation that involves two different types of kids, right? And one kid utters something, says like Jesus Christ or stubs their toe, and, oh my God, or God damn it, or something in church. One parent is shocked and appalled and feels the need to strictly punish that child for saying that thing while in church, and the other parent's like, that was kind of funny, right? That's not a political issue. That's just something in them is reacting to this issue. Like, well, kids say stupid things and make dumb mistakes. So for them, that kind of sanctity degradation thing for that one parent that doesn't think it's a big deal is lower, and the other parent is like, my kid just blasphemed in church.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's the power behind it. So for the sake of this, I'll kind of just play a role of an atheist. And I think what happens is that morality seems very powerful when you feel there's an agent behind it putting a duty on you. So when you experience this tension in your psyche between, let's just say, okay, I'm at the casino, I want to gamble, you got this inclination to do it, but you have this other thing in your head that says, I ought not do this, it's a bad thing. When you feel that's a deity's command upon you, I think it gives more force to it in your own mind. The idea, it gives you kind of like it's an agent, because I guess the theory that an atheist would give as to why people are religious and they have all these beliefs has to do with kind of how we evolved. So we didn't evolve to survive. We didn't evolve for truth. We evolved to survive, basically. So when we heard a rustling behind the leaves and we assume there's a predator and there's not, we basically over-infer agency, but we live. If we don't infer there's a predator, but there is, we ended up dying. So humans have a tendency to over-infer agency and in the world and things. And so the idea is when you have this experience, in that tension in the psyche, the belief that there is an agent that's putting this command on you makes it seem very powerful. So I think the point that D-Man is getting at is like, if he doesn't have that experience, then he seems that duty kind of melts away into kind of like a nothingness. He needs to believe in his mind that when he's having that tension in his psyche between, because he's like, well, I want to gamble, I want to do this, but I'm having in mind this duty telling me not to do this. And so he needs to believe that God is the one pushing that duty upon him to do that, or he feels
No,
he's
no,
just
no.
not going to have the power to just, or it just doesn't seem as significant to him. I wonder if, is that really
No, no.
the,
I mean, that was kind of, some of the things that you said were correct, but like that's not predominantly why theists don't do things, right? Because we clearly see that the creator knows best, so his directions would apply to us because they are inherently beneficial for us, right? So when he says don't take usury, don't gamble, don't drink alcohol, these are all tools of Satan to misguide you from my remembrance. So that's how we see it, and we stay away from all this nonsense,
yeah,
and
but
that's
that's
it. But
that's exactly what I said.
I know that's what you touched on. But I was just trying to,
I was
but
saying
again,
it makes it more powerful when in your mind the evil inclination is seen as
yeah,
Satan and the duty is seen as coming from God. It makes it
yeah,
more
yeah,
powerful.
yeah.
That's the idea. So I
But I
think that,
just
yeah, that's what you're saying. You basically said, you're saying you understand the gambling, this craving. You're saying, oh, this is Satan
okay.
whispering into my ears doing this. Oh, the higher duty, this is God's command. And it's that tension in your psyche when you think that there's these like supernatural causes behind it, it makes you experience it in a stronger, more powerful way.
Exactly. Like we recognize, the consequences more severely. And I think that's why I'm still confused about this idea that, because Jefferson, I see this as a compromise. Uh, the fact that, we all human beings agree that taking a life that doesn't deserve to be taken is wrong is because we want to make sure that societies work efficiently and effectively. We can't ground that on morality. And the atheist shouldn't ground it on morality, even if it is subjective, right? And that's my point. Like, if we, in the atheist paradigm, if let's suppose all of us were atheists, none of us believed in God, then the only reason we would not want people going around killing each other so we could survive. So that I see as a compromise, right? If somebody had the power and the might to kill everybody else and we wouldn't be able to do anything about it, then like in an atheist paradigm, morally they're not doing anything wrong. They have the power to do that, so they bloody well should. But it's just that it's not beneficial for the rest of us, so maybe it's best that they don't. So that I see as a compromise. And would you like agree, or do you have like a different opinion about this? I'm interested.
Well, I think generally the problem is like if it seems that apologists will direct kind of questions about what atheists think about, and I think they're fair questions to ask. A lot of atheists aren't that well read up or haven't done any philosophical or even sociological explorations or even anthropological, studies on morality and where they might come up. They don't do moral theory. So when they're asked, like, what is your moral theory? Christians usually have, like, speaking for Christians, because that was a tradition I came up in, they usually had kind of a handy one, but they did have separate ones. So you didn't have an objective morality even in the Christian faith tradition. You simply don't. But as far as like asking atheists, well, how would you ground it instead? Always kinds of comes across as like, well, a faith tradition has a grounding for this morality where you don't. Well, the atheist can come, depending on the atheist, they could be somebody that explains something like the moral foundations model, where morality isn't one thing, or they could come around and say, you know what, morality is basically just another word for human cooperation, and it operates on that spectrum. And I don't know if that would satisfy anybody within a faith tradition. But they have their justifications, they have their strengths and weaknesses as well. So I don't know that anybody really gets anywhere. But no matter what, I don't think that if there is an essential problem with objective morality, religion doesn't get us there. And I could give really good examples for why Christian morality definitely blows up the notion of objective morality. I don't know about it in other faith traditions, but Christianity definitely demonstrates them.
Fair enough. That's fair.
Well, so would you like me to tell you the from a Nietzschean? Okay, so let's say if you're going to critique Nietzsche, where a Christian might say his morality is good, and I think the guy's name is Tom Holland. So I'm just curious, what do you think about this view on Christianity? So you're familiar with Tom Holland as an atheist, saying, "Thank God that Christianity existed," and do you know what his reason for that was?
I have not followed him. I've seen a couple of who's doing it. Is it Mr. Deity? Has been doing videos, kind of talking about his stuff. I think I've seen one on it, but I'm not that familiar with Holland's arguments.
Okay, so Tom Holland's idea is this. It's like, you know what? Naturally, we're going to be a little more Nietzschean. We're going to want glory. And to quote the Lord's song, glory and go hand in hand. So the idea, if you say these competing emotions, these strong, dominant males are going to be concerned about glory and existence and power. And the world is just going to be their battleground. And so the idea is you needed the strong moral medicine of Christianity to tame that person, to just basically say no. So the idea, it was Christianity that made, because he says Holland would agree with Nietzsche. Yeah, Christianity is slave morality. That's what it's about. But yes, that's good, because I don't want people like, let's just say, people see me, I'm a big guy. I don't want people like blonde, muscular Pagan running around wanting glory, because they're going to do this at the suffering of everyone else. And someone had to stop them. And so Christianity was the moral medicine that stopped people like Ragnar Lothbrok from basically saying, the world exists for me to achieve glory and fame. But for me to achieve glory and fame, well, as I said for the Lord's song, glory and gore go hand in hand. There's going to be a lot of gore. So what do you think about that view, as someone's going to say, as far as Christianity is concerned? It tamed the beast in man.
That's sort of a weird, because that's sort of like I'm trying to think of the political philosophy that kind of gets into that, where essentially you need sort of the rule of law. Yeah, just basically, that way that the tallest nail gets hammered down first, or something like that, or the tallest flower gets lopped first. Everything needs to get evened out. Yeah, I've heard justifications for religions in general having that, like that it's bringing essentially what he's saying is that religion brings a civilizing influence on people and kind of keeps them humble. But I would argue, like, instead of getting a it might tame or at least leash a Ragnar Lothbrok, but you get Torquemada. You'll get somebody who works within the confines of that humble. They'll figure out a way to be haughty and power hungry in a seemingly humble and pious way instead. So, yeah, I don't think that and maybe I'm missing the point of that, but
okay. So the whole point would be basically he's trying to say that Christianity stopped the Ragnar Lothbroks from wanting glory at any cost. It tamed man down, but you're saying that sociopaths are going to find a way to exploit any system.
Yeah, it just sort of, I think it just kind of squirts that energy out in a different direction. I shouldn't probably use the verb squirt, but yeah, I think people are going to find a way to do that. If he has an argument to say like, okay, well, let's say under some kind of like, completely, pagan or heathen system, like, some Vikings would have, you're obviously going to have, the strongest guy rises to the top and he's going to lord it over everybody and just be abusive to everybody until he's stopped. Okay, maybe. But Christians have to wrestle with the fact that they believe the Roman Catholic Church was doing that exact same thing to them, and that's why they had the Reformation. So, yeah, I think, there's a lot of ways that just sort of deflates itself.
Well, Jeffrey Miller, who's an atheist, has a kind of theory on Christianity and paganism when it comes to this morality. And it's basically, so you're familiar with...
I'll have this be the last question. We're over 2 hours. We were planning for 2 hours, so it's not a big deal, but this will be the last question, and then we'll go ahead and close down.
Okay, so the idea is this is interesting. Tell me what you think of this one. So given the female cycle of good gene versus good provider, he kind of has morality based upon it. He saw pagan virtues as what he would call virtues of strength, of glory and power. He saw Christian virtues as pro-social virtues. So basically the idea is this, that Pagan societies are like these Viking societies because the goal is strength, power, and being poetry, verbal intelligence, creativity, strength, aggression. Whereas he's seeing the ideal in Christian societies, as he would call them, like puritanical societies, where you've got these pro-social virtues. So your goal is to sacrifice for the community and all these things. So that's the difference. In the Christian society, it's focusing more on that good provider aspect of the man. Whereas in the pagan Viking one, it's more of the good genes guy. It's how strong, aggressive, and creative he is. And so Christianity is, this is the theme of Christianity. This adds to the Tom Holland thing. It's just a means to kind of tame and domesticate, though he thinks that's a good thing. Nietzsche thinks that's a bad thing, though, but that's basically it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like it in a way, because you end up if you create a dominant culture that would put an emphasis on humility, cooperation, piety, church attendance. That's what makes a strong man, not the guy that can go out and kill an entire encampment on his own. He gets liquored up and he can do it. So society starts like, okay, these are the kinds of men that we need to have. These are the kinds of this is the kind of training that you need to do. These are the things that you kind of want to get. I mean, if I would ask somebody like Holland, like if he thinks that if Christianity is great for doing that, he must be really impressed with Confucianism.
Guys, if I can quickly come in for a second, I'm just about to leave. So I just want to say, Jefferson, I didn't know who you were, but obviously a lot of people, talk about Darth Dawkins, and I had no idea who he was either. He seemed to be like semi-famous on the Discord servers, etc. And
Yeah.
I went to one of his voice channels the day before yesterday, and that's when I heard him talk to other people the first time. And I couldn't help myself but come to the conclusion that at the base level, he's kind of like a vile, arrogant human being, regardless of his faith. And when I tried telling him that, he kind of interrupted me, so I just left. I didn't even talk to him. But I heard him say some stuff about you, so that's why I came in here, because I don't, just listen to people and believe what they're saying. I had to test that for myself, and you seem like a reasonable human being. So, as a token Muslim here, if you have any questions about Islam in future or whatever, feel free to reach out. I would love to address your questions, queries as best as I can to the best of my knowledge. And I've sent you a friend invitation, and this invitation is for everybody. Like, if you guys have any questions that you want to have in a nice environment, then I would be more than happy to answer them. Thanks for letting me in, Pagan, just now. I knew you were going to say something. I'm going to leave now, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Damien. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, nice meeting you.
Take it easy, Damien.
Good talking to you as well. See everyone later.
Yeah.
Cool. Jefferson, thank you, and everybody else. I guess just you now. Boom. But thank you for joining us. It was awesome talking with you today. We covered a lot of great topics. We probably sounded dumb on a few of them, but that's okay. That happens every time I talk. So, and I'm sure everybody else.
Same with me.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, don't let me stop you. Go ahead.
Yeah, anyways, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. Do you have any closing remarks? Everybody obviously should follow Jeff or subscribe to Jefferson Spatchcock on YouTube. But do you have any remarks or anything?
No, just a good conversation. It was nice to meet some new people on here. Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me on, Taco.
Hey, I appreciate it. You have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.